Defense Minister Yoav Gallant launched an open rebellion against Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday, and Prime Minister Netanyahu fired back. What's at stake, and what does it all mean for Israel as we wage a war for our national survival? I'll have the details and some of the answers coming up on In Focus. On Sunday, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant spoke with U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken. Gallant didn't ask for Prime Minister Netanyahu's permission, nor did he report to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the fact that he had, in fact, spoken to the U.S. Secretary of State. The reason we know it is because the State Department put out a report about their conversation. Now, we don't know exactly what they said in that conversation. Blinken said that he once again expressed the U.S.'s opposition to Israel's operation in Rafah, the operation that Israel has long determined is necessary, required, vital for our defeat of Hamas and our securing of the war goals that the Israeli government decided on at the outset of this war following Hamas's invasion of Israel on October 7th and its slaughter of 1,200 Israelis and its kidnapping of another 250. So Gallant met with or spoke on the phone with Blinken. Blinken told him that the United States opposes the operation in Rafah. That's what the State Department put out. Gallant didn't tell the Prime Minister that he was talking to the Secretary of State. He didn't tell him what happened on that conversation with the Secretary of State. And then on Monday, we marked Memorial Day for fallen IDF soldiers and for victims of terrorism. And on Tuesday, we celebrated our Independence Day. So after those 2 days of holidays, Yoav Gallant got up before the cameras and he said the following. Let's just watch it.
אני קורא לראש הממשלה, בנימין נתניהו, לקבל החלטה ולהכריז כי ישראל לא תשלוט אזרחית ברצועת עזה, כי לא יתקיים ממשל צבאי ישראלי ברצועת עזה, ותקודם מיידית אלטרנטיבה שלטונית לחמאס ברצועת עזה. זו חובתנו ואחריותנו להוביל את המדינה למקום טוב יותר. עכשיו, כרגע, זו המשמרת שלנו. לטובת עתיד המדינה, עלינו לקבל החלטות קשות, מתוך העדפת השיקול הלאומי על פני כל שיקול אחר, גם אם הדבר כרוך במחירים אישיים או במחירים פוליטיים. זהו רגע של מבחן לאומי, העם בישראל נושא אלינו עיניים ומצפה מאיתנו לקבל את ההחלטות הנכונות.
Well. And then shortly thereafter, Prime Minister Netanyahu shot back with a video of his own. Here, let's watch this one too. And then we'll discuss them both.
אני לא מוכן להחליף את חמאסטן בפתחסטן. אחרי הטבח הנורא של 7 באוקטובר, הנחיתי להשמיד את החמאס. לוחמי צה"ל וזרועות הביטחון נלחמים על כך. כל עוד החמאס נשאר על כנו, אף גורם אחר לא ייכנס לנהל את עזה האזרחית. בוודאי שלא הרשות הפלסטינית. 80% מהפלסטינאים ביהודה ושומרון תומכים בטבח הנורא של 7 באוקטובר. הרשות הפלסטינית תומכת בטרור, מחנכת לטרור, מממנת טרור. אני לא מוכן להחליף את חמאסטן בפתחסטן. ולכן התנאי הראשון להכשיר את הקרקע לגורם אחר ולחסל את החמאס. ולעשות זאת בלי תירוצים.
All right then. So a couple of background notes before we get into the nuts and bolts of what's going on here. First of all, we have to think about what are Israel's war goals. So shortly after October 7th, the former defense minister and chief of staff of the IDF, Benny Gantz, and his second former chief of staff of the IDF, Gadi Eisenkot, joined the government, and together with Netanyahu and Gallant, they formed the war cabinet. So the war cabinet has 3 voting members, Netanyahu, Gallant, and Gantz. And the 3 of them unanimously decided on 3 goals of the war that were later approved by the National Security Cabinet and by the government as a whole. And those three goals for the war are the military and political destruction of Hamas, the return of all of the hostages, and the prevention of Gaza from manifesting a security threat to Israel in the foreseeable future. Those are the three goals that were agreed to by these three men and that have been the basis of Israel's war effort in Gaza ever since. All right. Now, what are the American goals in this war? Well, the Americans want to end the war as quickly as possible. They want for Hamas to not be eradicated. They want for Hamas to be integrated into the Palestinian Authority. And they want the Palestinian Authority with Hamas, which, of course, has the allegiance of over 80% of the Palestinians, both in the Gaza Strip and in Judea and Samaria. They want Hamas to be seemingly co-opted into a new Palestinian Authority that will take over the governance of the Gaza Strip and be sort of the main paving stone towards the establishment of a Palestinian state that the United States will immediately recognize with a capital, presumably in Israel's capital city of Jerusalem. So that's what the U.S. goal is. They want the war over as quickly as possible, and they don't want Israel to achieve any of Israel's goals. The United States is pushing for a hostage deal that would see not only thousands of terrorists, including murderers, released from Israeli prisons. It would also see a cessation of Israel's war effort without victory. And it would only see the release of about 20 hostages from the 132 dead and alive that are being held in Gaza. So you would be leaving somewhere around 110 hostages in Gaza, and Israel would have no leverage for gaining the release of those hostages. So the United States plan is to do 100 or more Israeli hostages to never being released, and to denying Israel any military leverage over Hamas by requiring it to cease its military operations in Gaza and not renew them. And it seeks to guarantee the victory of Hamas by not only ensuring its survival, but also integrating it into a Palestinian Authority that Hamas would control. So those are the war goals of the United States. Are they distinguishable from Hamas's? Not in any significant way, not in any meaningful way. So the United States and Hamas now share the same war goals. Then there are Israel's war goals. And up comes the defense minister and says, amazingly, right, Netanyahu has to make a decision. Well, Netanyahu and Gallant and Gantz already made a decision. They said no to all of the Americans' war goals and all of Hamas's war goals, and they put out very rational war goals of Israel, which is the eradication of Hamas militarily and politically, the release of all of the hostages, and prevention of Gaza ever becoming a security threat to Israel again. So, you know, this is sort of the exact opposite of what he talks about in his statement last night. And for those of you who are listening to this on Spotify and don't speak Hebrew, I just want to read you a transcript of what Gallant said, because I think it's important and I want to go through it. He said, I urge Prime Minister Netanyahu to make the decision and proclaim that Israel will not impose civil rule on the Gaza Strip and that there will be no Israeli military government in the Gaza Strip, and that a civilian alternative to Hamas in Gaza will be advanced immediately. This is our duty and our responsibility to our country, to lead our country to a better place. Now is the moment. This is our watch. For the sake of the future of the country, we must make difficult decisions, placing the national interest before any other interest, even if it exacts a personal or political cost. This is the national test. The nation of Israel is looking to us and expects us to make the right decision. So he's saying that Netanyahu has to make a decision to enable the establishment of a Palestinian state, to bring in civil force of some sort, Palestinian, to bring it in now, immediately, even though Hamas hasn't been defeated, even though Gallant hasn't done his job of defeating Hamas as defense minister. This is something that he repeatedly pledged to do from October 7th on. And now he's walking away from that, and he's doing it ostensibly as a professional, saying, don't prefer political interests, right? Don't put the nation ahead of your political interest by betraying the nation and enabling our enemy, Hamas, to survive. So that's really interesting. And Netanyahu, for his part, for those of you listening on Spotify or any other podcast channel that you don't see the subtitles for Netanyahu, he said, I am not prepared to replace Hamas with Fatah. After the terrible massacre of October 7th, I ordered the destruction of Hamas. IDF warriors and security services are fighting to achieve this end. So long as Hamas remains standing, no other actor can come in and carry out a civilian governance of Gaza, certainly not the Palestinian Authority. 80% of the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria support the massacre of October 7th. The Palestinian Authority supports terror, advocates terror, finances terror, educates for terror, and finances terror. I am not prepared to replace Hamas with Fatah. Consequently, the first condition for preparing the ground for another authority is to destroy Hamas and to do so without excuses. Is what he's essentially saying to Gallant here is, you haven't done your job and now you're making excuses. That's true as far as it goes. Gallant has not secured victory. He has not defeated Hamas. He has allowed Hamas to reseat itself in areas by allowing the IDF Chief of General Staff Herzi Halevi to have IDF forces retreat from areas that they already seized control of rather than remaining in place or leaving forces in place to retain Israeli military control over areas like Gaza City, the Zaytun neighborhood there where we're fighting for the third time, Jabalia, where 5 paratroopers were just killed yesterday trying to retake Jabalia for the third time because Herzi Halevi and Gallant keep ordering the removal of IDF forces after we take it each time. And each time Hamas comes back, it reseats its forces in these areas, reasserts its civilian control over these areas, and we have to come in and we have to take them out. Why? Because of this stupid, idiotic plan, apparently, whatever you want to call it, haphazard plan that they claim is professional, that has the IDF leaving all the areas that it won victories in at the immense cost of the blood of our soldiers. So they keep having the IDF retreat, and then we have to keep going back in, and they're saying, this is no good, we don't want to have to do this over and over again, let's bring in the Palestinian Authority. But of course, the Palestinian Authority wants to integrate with Hamas, and it will integrate with Hamas. And the United States supports that integration of Hamas into the Palestinian Authority. So essentially what they're saying is, let's allow Hamas to survive. This, of course, is crazy. It's totally unprofessional. It's totally political, because what they're saying is we want to cover our butt professionally. We want to excuse our failure to bring victory to Israel because we've been implementing this strategy that is stupid. And we're going to do it by blaming Netanyahu, by saying he's not making the hard decision. But he made the hard decision at the outset. And he said in his direct remarks, to his direct rejoinder to Gallant, I ordered the IDF to destroy Hamas, to eradicate Hamas, he says. You had an order. And by the way, Gallant signed on to this order. He voted for it twice, both in the Security Cabinet and then later, in the War Cabinet with Gallant, with Gantz and Netanyahu, and then in the Security Cabinet. And now he's walking away from that promise, that pledge, that policy that was adopted by the government. And he's saying, no. Now we don't have a policy. Now we need a policy. And it's the prime minister that's blocking it, that he's preventing this train from going forward. This is the only train that's going to secure our future. Of course, it's going to endanger our future by allowing Hamas to win this war against. So what he is doing is he's presenting defeat in the war as a responsible thing to do, and refusal to accept defeat in the war as the unprofessional thing to do, where you're preferring your political and personal well-being to the well-being, the future of the nation, which, of course, all of us seek defeat, right? After 730 of our soldiers have been killed, plus 5 from today, plus 3 from 5 from yesterday, 3 more from the day before yesterday. Who is he kidding? It's not a funny joke. It's not a joke at all. It's deadly serious, and it's a disgrace. So why is he doing it? Well, obviously one of the reasons, as I just said, is because he wants to justify his personal failure. Gallant has totally failed in his job. Yesterday, Hezbollah shot down a very strategic, apparently it's an air-controlled balloon, a strategic balloon, big antenna that looks like a blimp at Golani Junction, 45 kilometers from the border with Lebanon. And this is a hugely important strategic site. They've been doing similar things to strategic sites much closer to Lebanon since October 7th, attacking the Northern Command air control base that controls all aerial traffic in the Middle East effectively. And they took out one of the surveillance balloons there that controls the airspace. They've done similar things to radar stations in Mount Meron. So they're taking out strategic sites with their precision-guided rockets, and Israel is responding to this by attacking the launching pads after the fact. This is crazy. We have, 80,000 people from the north who cannot go home. Yesterday, we had a resident of my town, Efrat, by the name of Fingerhut, 2 days ago. No, on Tuesday. And so Hezbollah shot at an IDF post and wounded a bunch of soldiers. And this civilian came, his name is Fingerhut, to help them. And Hezbollah taped this film of them shooting him, and he was blown to pieces to the point where, it took a long time to identify his body. He's being buried now in Kfar Etzion Regional Cemetery. And you look at this, you're like, what in the heck? We're giving up northern Israel? We're not fighting because Gallant doesn't want to, because Herzi Halevi doesn't want to, because for 7 years they've been, futtering away in Gaza. They haven't won. They only started going into Rafah, last week. Why? And now that they've done this, and we're facing this situation where the United States is enacting an effective arms embargo against Israel, they're going over to the United States and signing with the United States as it itself has adopted Hamas's war goals. So one of them is to excuse failure. Now we're going to blame it on Netanyahu and say because he won't accept failure and defeat in this war, he is not taking the national interest into account, and he's not behaving responsibly, and he's preferring his personal interest over the interests of the country, which is, crazy. But, what is the goal here? Why would he do this? Why would he make common cause with the U.S. administration that's openly siding with Hamas and Iran and Hezbollah against Israel? Well, because they want to oust Netanyahu from power. There's also a personal ambition thing going on here. In last year, in March of 2023, Gallant tried this stunt before. If you remember, we were facing these massive demonstrations by the left that were fulsomely supported by the Biden administration to oust Netanyahu from power in the 10 months really that preceded October 7th by saying that he was trying to seize control of all organs of Israeli state and be a dictator because he had put forward with his government a very limited, I would argue pathetic, effort to curb the right now unconstrained powers of our Supreme Court. So they put out this very modest proposal for minimal limits to be placed on the court's power that it's arrogated to itself from the Knesset and from the government with no legal basis for doing so. And they were trying to, put a couple of checks and balances on the court, and the left went ballistic and started, lighting the country on fire. And Gallant, seeing this in March of 2023, said we can't go forward anymore with a legal reform because we're facing a rebellion inside of the IDF over because you had all these leftist generals, particularly in the Air Force and in Intel. We're saying, oh no, we're not going to serve in the IDF anymore if we go forward with placing constraints on the radical left's control over the deep state in Israel, which they exercise through the court system and the Attorney General's office, over which they have total control. And so the government comes in, tries to place tiny limits on the power of the court, and they light the country on fire, and Gallant sided with. Now, just to be clear, people have come in and said, well, it's Netanyahu's fault because he appointed him defense minister. Look, yeah, I guess, but nobody thought that he was going to do this. He was running in the November 22 elections and then previously in the Likud primaries ahead of those elections as this far-right guy who, was with everybody else in the party in his demand to reform the legal system of Israel. So, when he came in after the election, there was no controversy over his appointment, really. Some people are saying, well, not sure how credible he is because he has this past with Ariel Sharon and supporting the expulsions. But there were reasonable rejoinders to that. And so people there was no there was no opposition to his appointment to defense minister. Nobody thought that he was going to pull this. But, since he went in, he has completely aligned his positions with the left-wing generals who run the general staff of the IDF and are self-selecting and all the rest of it. And so last March he did it. Now, why did he do it last March? Because he thought that he was going to be able to oust the government, maybe replace Netanyahu as head of Likud or something like that, because under Israel's laws, you can avoid elections and appoint a new prime minister if you get simultaneously a majority, an absolute majority, so 120 members of the Knesset. If you get 61 members of the Knesset voting no confidence in the government, and also at the same time putting forward an alternative government with 61 seats in it. So right now, Netanyahu's organic coalition has 64 members. So in order for the government to fall, you need 5 people to defect and to vote no confidence in the government. So Gallant would ostensibly be the first person to vote no confidence and join the opposition. And then we have another would-be head of the Likud who had challenged Netanyahu's leadership in the past, named Yuli Edelstein. Edelstein is currently the chairman of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee, and he came forward with a statement yesterday indicating that he too would vote no confidence in the government over a different issue. And then, the question is, can you find 3 low-hanging fruit in the Likud of people who feel like they aren't being properly respected by Netanyahu or have expressed disloyal positions regarding the prime minister more or less consistently for several months? And there are a few like that. And so in March 2023, he tried this stunt. He thought that he had lined up his ducks. And then Netanyahu immediately tried to fire him when he came out with his press conference calling for the annulment or the cancellation of the legal reform effort. And he did it, by the way, while Netanyahu was in London, and it was still Shabbat in London, so Netanyahu couldn't even respond to what Gallant did that day. And so Netanyahu let it be known that he intended to fire Gallant. And then the left and the U.S. government, the Biden administration, started threatening that they were going to light the country on fire. The Biden administration was going to destabilize us in whatever way. And so Netanyahu went back on that decision and did not fire Gallant because he was afraid that they would, in fact, destroy the army and that they would ignite the country. And so he didn't fire Gallant, and things sort of settled down, but Gallant has always been disloyal since then, openly, and openly contemptuous of the prime minister. And he's kept it under wraps really since October 7th, more or less, because he shared major responsibility for what happened on October 7th. I mean, the army didn't show up that day. Only individual soldiers who organized on their own, they were the bulk of the force that went in. It wasn't from the general staff directing anything. And there were major screw-ups that day that, we'll talk about in another episode, that were from the top. The Air Force didn't show up. 8 hours, no Air Force on the ground. How is that possible? They could have blown up all the terrorists on the Gaza side of the border, and they didn't. They didn't take off practically. I think there were 4 jets in the air a few hours after it had already started, and thank you very much for that. Right? So, this was a supreme failure, and Gallant was in charge, and this is his thing. Anyway, so when you look at it, you say, all right, so it didn't work back in 2023, and actually in 2023 it could have worked, because in 2023, ostensibly, the stakes were much lower. It was just about legal reform, yes or no. And by the way, the Biden administration totally opposed it, and the Biden administration was not considered a hostile force, so that aligning yourself with the position of the American government at the time was not, it was considered obviously controversial because it's a foreign power, but it wasn't considered controversial the way it is today when the Biden administration is openly undermining our war effort and, without blushing, they're doing it. And, announcing arms embargoes against us in the middle of critical battles and everything like that. So it didn't work back then. And, obviously there's a question of why he thinks it would work now. And who knows? Maybe he has some promises from another 3 Likud members. Maybe, there's something else going on behind the scenes. I don't know. But, that's clearly what he's hoping for. And then, it's kind of like this Hail Mary pass that Naftali Bennett did back in 2022 when he formed this government that was the furthest, that was anti-Zionist, effectively, was controlled by forces that reject Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, like the Muslim Brotherhood Party, Ram. Anyway, Naftali Bennett, who is ostensibly an ideological right-wing party, he betrayed all of his voters, just like Gallant has been doing, and he formed this government, and he only had 6 members of Knesset that were supporting him, that were in his party, that were joining him in the government, or 5, because they came in with 6, 6-man team. 1 was out, and they formed this government with all of these parties, most of which were bigger than his party. So he had no real political power. And his idea was that, and he said it openly, he said, well, I might not be supported now, but give me a year in power, and, I'll be more popular than Netanyahu, and my party will be polling better than Likud. In the event, that isn't what happened. He went from, I think it was 5% of the public supporting him to basically 0. And he didn't run again in 2023 because he would, or at the end of 2022, because he would have been ousted from office. So that was what Naftali Bennett did. And, okay. Right. And Gallant apparently thinks the same thing. Maybe he'll be prime minister in an alternative government, and he thinks, or he'll remain defense minister or something. And he thinks that, the public will like him so much that they'll forgive his betrayal, and he'll get elected somehow or another in the next election, maybe as the head of Likud. This is totally delusional, because today, unlike the situation last year when he tried this stunt, the public is much more aware of the hostility of the administration towards Israel, towards our war goals, towards our most basic national interests, and in fact, in a way that endangers our very survival as a country. And because the public also understands the implications of changing horses in the middle of the stream here, which is that Israel will lose the war, because the only politician who has consistently demanded victory and still demands victory and still demands that we fight to victory is the prime minister. As he said, you can't talk about the day after when you haven't even defeated Hamas. So if you want to talk about the day after, do your job, defeat Hamas, and stop making excuses. And so I don't know that he has any chance of actually succeeding in his plot, but there it is. That's the plot. And here I just want to talk a little bit about the stakes involved and what's going on. So I talked about the situation in the north. That's simply untenable. And we have to understand that when we look at the precision of Hezbollah's rockets and missiles and their range that covers essentially all of Israel, including all of our strategic sites like Dimona in the south and the General Staff headquarters in Tel Aviv and all kinds of other things. And we think about Gaza and what it would mean to Israel if Hamas isn't defeated, what it would mean to our hostages if Hamas isn't defeated. And of course, the signal that it sends to the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, which, as Prime Minister Netanyahu rightly noted, 80% of whom supported the massacre of October 7th and would clearly like to carry similar ones out from Judea and Samaria. We understand that Gallant's position here is just so dangerous for the country. And what he has on his side, the same thing riding now, is what happened back in March of 2023 when he tried this stunt earlier, which is that, here he is sitting as ostensibly a Likud minister, a senior minister, the senior minister in Prime Minister Netanyahu's government, the defense minister in time of war. And what he's saying is, I'm here because the far left and the U.S. government, which supports Hamas's war aims against Israel, will destabilize the country if I'm fired. I dare you to fire me and watch and see what they're going to do to this country. That's an incredible situation to be in, but that's essentially where we are, right? The public overwhelmingly supports the war goals that Gallant and Gantz are signed on to from right after October 7th. They don't support the goal of transforming October 7th into Palestine's Independence Day. And that's where Gallant's demand will take us immediately, and everybody knows it. Our soldiers have not given their lives in Gaza in order to establish a Palestinian terror state. That's not why they're fighting today in Rafah and in the Zaytun neighborhood in northern Gaza and in Jabalia and in the camps in central Gaza. That's not why they're giving their lives today. That's not why they're getting wounded today. That's not what they're fighting for. I don't think Gallant will be able to even show his face in military units in Gaza anymore because he would risk his life and limb if he tries to go and visit the soldiers that he's betraying. And, I think that what Netanyahu has to do, if I may, I think that, yes, he has to rally the people to his side. I think much more important than it was even in March of 2023 when it was critical, because everything is riding on it. Well, it's because everything is out in the open. I mean, this guy, Gallant and Gantz, they're both being directed. Obviously, they're not even trying to hide it again by the Biden administration. It was Blinken that put out the press statement saying that he spoke to Gallant, and Gallant didn't tell the prime minister about their phone conversation. They don't care. They have total contempt for the will of the Israeli people. They want to overthrow our government. They want us to lose this war. They want Hamas to win this war. They want Iran to win this war. They want Hezbollah to win this war. They want us to lose the North. They want us to lose the South. They wanted us to lose a nuclear deterrent because Iran is going to have one. They want all these things. Why do they want it? Because they want a post-America world. That's why. Because they're Obama's third term in office. That's why. Because they're radical. Because Tony Blinken's parents are communists, and everybody that he put into positions making decisions and that Biden put it in the National Security Council under Jake Sullivan, they're anti-Israel. And they don't see the United States as the last great, hope for mankind or as the leader of the free world. They see the United States as a problem on the international stage. That's why they're not defending its position. So, this is very much a foreign policy edition of, the reinvention of the U.S. military as some sort of, a post-American fighting force where what's most important is what your gender is. And, that's who they are. That's where they are. And Americans will vote if they want this or they don't want it in November. Fine. But, Netanyahu should, I think he should put it on the table. He should meet with the Likud members of Knesset, should address them before the microphones, talk about what the stakes are, talk about what we're fighting for, and talk about what the threats are to victory, and dare them, essentially, to go with Gallant against the people of Israel and against our national interests. We'll see what happens. I think that's really what has to happen. And then we'll see, this will fail. And that's the one thing that we have to bear in mind. And, it's sort of like the end of every crisis stands an Israeli mother and demanding victory. That's what happens. It's like you look and you see everywhere you turn, whether it's parents of soldiers who have fallen, parents of soldiers who are in Gaza fighting, residents from the north who want to go home but will not go home until Hezbollah is dealt with in a very decisive way and pushed away from the border with its strength massively diminished. Very hard to do, but that's just what it is. Residents of the south who won't go home so long as they have missiles exploding in Sderot and in Netiva Sarah and all the rest of the border communities with Gaza. And Hamas is still there. You have one demand, victory. We want victory. We demand victory. We demand, exactly as Netanyahu said to Gallant, stop making excuses for not bringing us what you promised. You didn't promise us a Palestinian state, and we wouldn't have accepted it if you had promised us a Palestinian state, because we're not stupid. We know this is an existential threat to our existence. It's why over 90% of Israeli Jews oppose it. We don't want a Palestinian state. We don't want the Palestinian terrorist authority. That's true. It's funded by the United States and supported by the leftists and the general staff and all the rest of it. We don't want them in charge of Gaza. We don't even want them in charge of Judea and Samaria. They're bad. They're our enemies. They're fighting a political and terror war against us and funding terror against us. Why would you want to empower them? They're never going to change their spots. We don't want any of that. We want one thing, victory. Because the only way to guarantee the survival of this country and the only way to rebuild security for our people is victory. And if you can't bring it, resign, for crying out loud. We didn't want you there in the first place. We certainly didn't care that you were there. We didn't care that you weren't there. Nobody really supported or opposed you, Gallant. You seem like a safe choice to vote for in the primaries. Nobody thought that you were going to turn on your voters this way and at such a critical moment twice already since you were brought in 2023 and now in 2024. Enough already. If you don't want to be part of a government that wants to bring victory, then leave it. Same, by the way, with the chief of staff of the IDF, Herzl Levy. You care so much about what the investigation is going to show that you insist on remaining there and appointing your lackeys to the key positions that are going to be in place when the investigation is carried out to whitewash your failures. Is that what's going on, Herzl? And Gallant, what are you doing? You're trying to prime the pump so that you'll be able to oust Netanyahu and bring in another IDF general staff that's going to hide what happened before October 7th. Whatever it is that's, moving you to betray the country, to betray the people, to betray your pledge, to betray our security. Nobody worth anything electorally thinks that what you're doing is right. So resign. You're not going to succeed in this. You're not going to oust the prime minister and bring in yourself or Gantz to replace him. It's not going to happen. Meantime, you're providing incredible, sense of triumph to our enemies sitting in their tunnels in Gaza and wherever the heck they are in Tehran and in Beirut. Stop it. Leave. Anyway, those are my thoughts for today. And I'll talk to you guys again next week. Don't worry. People of Israel aren't going anywhere. Take care.